Hi, I'm Angelina Darrisaw, founder and CEO of C-Suite Coach. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about is bringing group coaching into some of our clients and companies that we work with. Today, we won't be able to have a full group coaching experience, but I love the idea of bringing insights from a group that has a shared mission, a theme that they're working towards, and to then be able to get peer feedback on how we can approach that theme. So we'll have elements of that present throughout our conversations here today. What was your first corporate role? And then what was your first creative role? And how did you get the courage to pursue each of those?
Wow. Well, first, it's an honor to be here with each of you. And I mean that, right? We're in Cannes during the Cannes Lions Festival of Creativity. And I couldn't think of a better topic than to talk about corporate to creative in such a creative environment, such a beautiful space to be in here in France. And if you had told me, Angelina, when I was a little girl, or even 10 years ago, that I would be sitting here today in France having a conversation like this with women of color, I would have laughed and thought that it was not possible. And so I think, the idea of possibilities in a conversation like this is important. I've spent the last 25 years at the intersections, I always say, of corporate, entertainment, politics, and tech. And I can say that my first corporate job was also my first creative job. I always wanted to take roles that fueled my creativity, fueled innovation, and still felt fun, to be honest. And I think, I know for me and probably many of us, I never wanted to have a corporate job that felt like I wasn't living a life of purpose. And so every role that I pursued and every role that I've taken from the beginning was like truly purpose driven and fueled with creativity. And even when it wasn't, I brought creativity to the role. And so my first job ever, funny enough, it wasn't my first corporate job, was working for Wu-Tang Clan. That's a great first job. That's okay. And literally in Atlanta as a freshman, 18-year-old freshman at Clark Atlanta University, wanting to work in the music industry, right? Chasing creativity, like chasing music, something that I was very passionate about. And at the time, still, but especially at the time, they were the biggest global music group in the world, not just hip hop. I mean, globally, they were the number one group. And I was, a green 18-year-old with the audacity to believe that I could work for the biggest group in the world, straight out of Wilson, North Carolina. So this was like, unimaginable for everyone that I knew. And I went in and gave my best elevator pitch and landed a paid job on the spot. And so that's where my journey began at 18 years old in Atlanta. And that was all creative, but also very corporate, although not in a corporate setting. I mean, I handled all the logistics and the operations, and I was responsible for the street promotions and just everything required to get fans and consumers in seats for anything that they had and consumers to buy their merchandise. And so that's where it began. But then after that, my true first corporate role was for HBO and HBO Sports. And we can talk when you're ready about the creativity that was brought to that space.
Yeah. Already, I'm making connections because the first thing that's coming up for me is how much we separate those two things. And I love that you brought out that we can be creative and get that journey started in a corporate space. So we'd love to dive in deeper there. But I do want to kick it off just hearing a little bit from each of you about what comes to mind for you when you think about embracing or pursuing creativity. What comes up? If it's a word or a short phrase, it'd be great to hear a little bit more about that. And I'll kick it off just to start. What comes up for me is fear of failure a little bit. Creativity is something that sometimes it feels like some people have it and some people don't. And I think when I think about embracing creativity, I think a little bit about it feels so risky. And is there opportunity to pursue it and still feel some of the comfort that I'm used to and that I feel really comfortable with? So would love to hear from each of you what comes up for you.
Hi, everyone. Lucy Pinto from Google. I'm a senior marketing manager. And I think when I think about creativity, I think about authenticity. And I think about how at times it's hard to be like your authentic self, especially in corporate settings when you have a lot of, politics or bureaucracy around you. But I do think, instead of blending in, when I think of creativity is having your authentic voice and a courageous voice. I think both are combined, being authentic and being courageous so that you can propel your ideas forward. So authenticity and courage. Thank you.
No, go this thing off the back. You're so lovely. Milan Zoe, you said something that was interesting, which is fear of failure when it comes to creativity. And I actually shared in that fear for a really long time. And then I learned that creativity is subjective. And it is not the job of an artist to meet the world. It is the job of the world to meet the artist. And when I began to live in that and allowed my creativity to be authentic to who I am rather than what I thought people wanted to see, I created the best art ever.
I'm Alexis Feaster, founder and CEO of the Kinship Advisors. And when I think of creativity, I think of stereotypes in a way. I remember being a young child and, talking to my family and talking about all these ways that I wanted to bring, culture and pizzazz into these different rooms. And my sister is an aspiring lawyer at the time. And I have another sister that's in more like tech data. And my parents were like, how are you going to make a living with this mind of yours? And, so when I think about what that felt like as a young person, and then now when as an entrepreneur, I'm being paid to be creative, I'm being paid to be at the intersection of sports and culture and politics and all of the things. And the first thing people do is they say, take off what other people think may be, right? Like take off that hat and put on like that hat of the magic. Like what is the thing that other people don't see? And I feel like I've been able to do that in a bunch of different spaces and connect the dots in a way that have been really, really creative. So I think of like breaking down stereotypes and I think of power. So I love it.
Okay, I'm Ashley. I am head of production at Seed. And when I think of creativity, I think of it as a superpower. At my core, I think I am a problem solver. And in order to do that, you need to be creative. And it's been something that has been innate in me since I was a little girl. And so I would say it's my superpower and it's something that you really have to just dive into.
Thank you all for sharing. I'm getting my ahas even just in listening to you. So, Valeisha, something that comes up sometimes when we think about being a creative is having to share your creativity and put yourself out there. And that's that risk piece. So I'm really glad that you all touched on ways in which we can embrace that. What has that journey been like for you? So whether you're thinking about what it was like to be that 18-year-old in Wilson or coming from Wilson, North Carolina to say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to work with Wu-Tang Clan, or some of the creative choices you've made even lately, what has given you the courage and where did you find that courage to be able to put yourself out there for those opportunities?
I think for me, I'm not a creative in the traditional sense. I don't think, and I think when I think of creators, usually they are people who like just build or create the most beautiful music or the most beautiful designs. I think of artists. I think of, just marketers and individuals who can just like think in bright colors and broad strokes. I think my creativity, similar to Ashley, is around, quite frankly, the strategy and execution. And how do I bring those bold, vivid ideas to life creatively? And so, I think of our days, Alexis and I worked together on the Obama campaign. We got very creative in Chicago. And I'll never forget, just to bring humanity into this, I was pregnant, expecting my first child in Chicago in the middle of the winter, working for a presidential campaign re-election, which is important. And we had to be creative to even deliver and execute. Every day was different. We had to think on our feet. Every night we looked at numbers and data and metrics and analytics in each state and had to be creative and find solutions to move the needle. And so I would say first to each of us and anyone listening or watching that, you know, don't allow anyone else or maybe even yourself to put you in a box, right? The creative can also be the executor. It can be the person who delivers big ideas. It can be the person that says, you know what, I work in this huge corporate space and I find great value, and the business finds great value in me because I can bring all of this creativity to the forefront in a way that moves the needle and drives business outcomes and can affect the bottom line. And so I think so often we think that the creative side of things is the fun, sexy side, but they actually work together. And so it's okay to be multidimensional. It's okay to say, you know, I'm in my creative bag today, my executor bag tomorrow, or if maybe even you're a founder, you have to wear all of the hats. And it's okay to bend and shift and maybe even pivot sometimes in the moment to meet the needs of the moment. And so I think that that's important. For me, especially in the beginning, to your point, it was really about vision, right? Like seeing the unseen, believing the unbelievable, and saying, wow, yes, I'm from this very humble, small environment where I've never seen anyone that has done this. I don't have examples of people who have done this. At the time, you couldn't search for it, right? You just had to go get it. And in order to go get it, you had to, and I had to have such a clear vision and purpose for my life that no one understood. And that takes clear vision, clear faith, and courage and boldness to say, I don't even know if this is attainable. I don't know if it truly exists, but I'm going to go build it if it doesn't. And so the creativity and having vision for that and then taking that step is what I believe, quite frankly, is the reason why I'm here, right? Every path for me pointed to go to law school, stay in North Carolina, run for elected office, and live a great life probably for the next 50 to 70 years if I'm lucky. And I said I want a different path. And I didn't know if it would work out, but it's worked so far. And I believe that when we follow that type of vision and purpose, it always aligns in your favor.
Yeah. You know, you sparked something, B, when you're talking about, you know, obviously the Obama world reminded me, but creativity is also about the collective. So some people feel like if I'm not able to execute or if I'm not able to draw, or if I'm not able to be that thing, am I a creative? The ability to put people together is very, very creative. The ability to, even in this moment, right? We walk in, we see you, like family. Oh, well, we're all here, right? There's creativity that it takes to even have us sitting here. And I think as people, we need to see the value in what it looks like to bring collectives together. And, you know, in the Obama campaign, the example of that was when we created DJs for Obama and we created athletes for Obama and we created, and, you know, we started with D Nice and then went to, you know, Carmel and all these others. And folks like, how did you think of that? Well, that's creative thinking. But at the end of the day, when you bring people together, there's power in that. There's nuance in that I think is really, really important. And so I think all of us are creatives in our own ways. And within your community, if you're, again, putting these different pieces together, you're an architect. How creative is that to be an architect in those different ways? So anyway, maybe reminded me of that.
I'm really glad that you shared that because I feel I personally, and Valeisha, this is something you and I talk about a lot. I'm on a path to embracing my multifacetedness. And I think being able to understand that you're creative even in doing non-traditionally artistic things was really, really critical for me. And it helps me once you're able to remove what a label has to be on yourself, then you're able to embrace more labels for yourself in a positive way. So I'm really glad that you shared that. Something else, though, that comes to mind when I think about creativity is that we're artists and we're sensitive about our stuff, right? That's what, shout out to Erica. And so one of the challenges then often is that there can be folks that stifle our creativity. Have you ever felt stifled in your creativity? And then what do you do to balance that? Oh yeah, it's a whole thing. All right. Hey. Yes. Okay. So, one thing that comes to mind to me often is as creatives, we can sometimes feel stifled in our creativity. Has there ever been anything that you felt stifled, your creative lens, your wings, your ability to fly in it? And how do you combat that?
Every time that I've had a creative vision, literally every time, it's been, of course, stifled, questioned, met with resistance, and those inherent barriers because that's what's supposed to happen, right? Like, I think when you're giving birth to an idea that is a vision that probably only you have, it's fueled with creativity, which means that you have to create that idea. Very few are going to understand it. And so for me, whenever it is met with resistance, I first anticipate it, right? It could be from a colleague, it could be from a business partner, it could be from, everyone in that environment, pressure testing this idea, which I think is healthy to creativity, right? You want to test your creativity, you want to test your ideas, but not at the expense of that idea not happening. It's just to refine it, to perfect it, to make it better. And so for me, I now know earlier for sure, right? I would fall apart. Why don't they get it? It's my vision. Why can't they see it? It's clear. But no, right? You have to create mood boards. You have to, create ideas that can support your vision. And often, that will be pressure tested. And when it is, I now anticipate it and I take it for what it is, which is feedback. And sometimes I use that feedback, sometimes I don't. But I allow, myself to just open up to ideas that maybe I hadn't thought of yet, things that would maybe even make this product or this idea better. And then either I pivot or I don't incorporate it. And that's okay too. And so for me, it's all of those things. What I make sure of though is that I get to the end result. And that's important to me, to not get caught in the funnel of ideation, caught in the funnel of like strategy sessions and just thinking things through until you actually kill the idea. Because that happens too. I now know how to set boundaries around the feedback that I receive around my creativity and make sure that it doesn't either water it down or kill the idea completely. And so, yeah, I think there have been several times, certainly in every environment. What I've done sometimes as a hack, though, is if you're in a corporate space and you just know that this idea works, you've even maybe gotten user feedback or audience feedback or community feedback, and it supports your idea, but perhaps you have stakeholders or leaders who don't fully understand it yet. The way that I've had to work around in prior ideas is just to say, all right, well, let's test it. Let's pilot this idea, see if it works with the intended audience, and then scale it from there. And so normally, especially in a corporate setting, when it may be harder to get it off the ground, it's getting folks bought into the idea a little bit more through a pilot or a beta phase.
Yeah. I can add to that. So I didn't mention earlier, but I'm the founder of a company called Melanin Plus, which I created specifically to help minorities matriculate through their health and wellness journeys. And I've gotten to a place with my company not only do I anticipate it, but I embrace it. Steve Jobs talked about actually creating a culture of dissension intentionally because he wanted to be able to know if there was anything that anybody was going to think was wrong about what we were doing or someone had a better idea. I want to know it inside of my organization before we go to market. And so I don't have an official board, but I do have some very select individuals that I go to ask like, hey, I'm going to launch this. I'm going to pilot this. What are your thoughts? And I think what's important is just being very specific about who you go to for that advice, right? We say the same thing in our dating life. You're not going to ask every single one of your friends about your new man, but you got those 2 or 3 that you really value their opinion. And, we were just talking about this yesterday. You really value their opinion. And so I think that just being selective about who you share with to kind of protect your ideas, because again, they're our babies, So.
And before I pass it back down, I'll say too, sometimes we have to stifle our own creativity. And I feel like, especially in the corporate space, because let me tell y'all, that's the
mean, that's literally, and we've talked about this at different times around being at a place like the NBA. So I worked out of the NBA league office for many years. And I'm like, oh, I'm in my creative bag. I'm so creative. We're going to be the most progressive league ever. But that's my intellectual property. I know y'all pay me for that, but I'm being super, super creative in all these different spaces. And I had to realize that sometimes I need to stifle my own creativity. It's not meant for everybody, right? As an entrepreneur, oh yeah, I'm getting all the creativity, gold magic, unicorns, all the things all the time. But sometimes I think, especially as Black women, we put so much into spaces that will stress us out. We're trying to build every new thing for everybody in a space that we don't own. And so I think we have to think about that too. Sometimes, and we're a wealth of ideas, so it's not about holding anything back in that perspective, but I had to learn to stifle my own creativity in spaces to keep my sanity and to also, again, build things where I'm wanted, respected, and appreciated all the time, regardless. And so I know that's not oftentimes what people want to hear, but I'm like, hold some of it back a little bit.
Sure. Good.
Yeah, our founder. That's our goal.
Yes, exactly.
Spaces where we can authentically be ourselves, because it's unfortunate to be in a space where where you have to stifle your creativity. Who wants to, That's why you do your own thing now. Period.
Yes, boss. It's giving found.
So it's interesting because as I'm hearing you speak, I can't remember who it was that said this, but they were talking about how their creative ideas, it's not necessarily they're stifling them, but they just put them on a shelf because it might not be the right time or it might not be the right platform. Your ecosystem might not be, supportive enough, but the idea is still there. And when all the stars align, you just take that off the shelf and you run with it. And I think that was a big learning for me too, because sometimes you might have these big 10x ideas and the world is so behind you and you're thinking way ahead and they're not ready for it. And it might be that is an amazing idea. It might just need some time or the right people to come in and say yes. But the idea in itself is still something that you can work towards. So when I think about creativity and in the workplace, even when I get to a no, I do take that feedback, but I still keep that idea on the shelf and try to strategize around it as much as I can so that when that pendulum swings my way and it's oh my gosh, we can turn the switch on tomorrow. I'm ready to go and I'm ready to execute. So I think that's also part of combining the creativity with the corporate is you can have really bold ideas. Maybe it's not the time or maybe the investment isn't there yet. But once you get it, having the ability to run with it and being ready for that is also equally as important as the idea itself.
Yes, I know those folks out there came for Valeisha's panel, so you can tell them they can come in or the talk. Yeah. I'm really glad that you said that, Lucy, because you brought up something for me that I have to think about a lot as an entrepreneur, which I now realize is a form of creativity. And that is just getting comfortable with the no's. And I have a friend also who's a Broadway actress. We used to talk about this all the time. Putting yourself out there for pitches is a lot like auditioning to get a role in a play or get a role in theater. And you can audition tens and dozens and hundreds of times before you get that breakout role. But you have to put yourself out there to be able to hear the no. And so analogy someone gave to me was Hall of Fame baseball players still only have a 30% batting average. And these are the best in the world, right? The best. If we look at Stephen Curry, best 3-point shooter in a very long time, only shoots at 40%. So I want to hear from you. What do you think about when you're getting a lot of the no's for your creative vision or your creative pursuits? And how do you deal with those no's?
Well, I know we've probably all heard this phrase before, but I live by it. I truly live by it. And that's in business and even my personal life. And it's that rejection is redirection, right? And so rejection is redirection, truly. And so I think for me, I no longer look at it as a batting average or a numbers game. It's just alignment, period. right? What's for your business, what's for your vision, what's for your idea is for you. And what's not will naturally fall off or say no or not understand it. And that's okay too, because it just gets you faster to your yes. Like I'm also big with my team, right? I'd rather a no than a maybe any day so I can cut my losses and keep moving to my yes. And so for me, I think it's so easy to look at it as like points on the board, right? And you stakeholder map. Okay, these are the key stakeholders that I need to reach out to. Okay, these are the 5 to 10 businesses or partners that I want to go pitch, right? These are the 5 leaders or, whoever that you believe can be the gatekeeper to your yes or the decision maker to your yes. And while you for sure have to have strategy and a roadmap, I go now through that plan with like clear intentions and clear expectations that what is in alignment for this will happen and it will move with speed. Because alignment doesn't take time, right? People with shared goals, people with shared vision, people with budget don't actually drag their feet, right? So you have to move at the speed of culture and the speed of business. And anyone, especially as you go higher, you ascend in your ventures, as you go higher and ascend in your career, you'll find that the yeses are faster when you're with the true decision makers who are in alignment with your goals. When it takes too long and it moves too slow, it's probably not either the right person or in alignment with your vision. And that I've learned. And now that I'm in and many of us are, right? Now, there's always like the door behind the door. There's like, you think you're in the big room, but then there's actually the other room that's not as big. So as I unlock and decode and navigate these rooms now, and often find myself like many of us do as the only woman, the only person of color in that space, I see how deals get done. It's like, it's not transactional. Usually people are in relationship with one another in a way that's like natural feeling, right? But it's like not just there for the transaction. It's like we've built a relationship over time. So there's trust. Trust is important, a secret ingredient. Trust in the person sitting across the table, not to just do business, but to be a good person in doing business. And then those yeses happen with sometimes handshake deals, right? There's rarely an MOU. There's rarely an LOI. They move straight to contract, right? Because it's just like, no, I see you. I trust you. You're in alignment. So let's go. And so for me, I think that we have to move with that level of intention and expectation. The last thing I'll say on this too, though, is and not being afraid to ask for the real number. Okay. Right? I think so often, especially as folks from underrepresented groups or what Arlen Hamilton describes as like underestimated groups, right? We go in with that posture, right? We ask for the thing instead of creating the value prop. We're negotiating against our own value just to get the deal done. And now that I've started to see, other dimensions of this thing, I'm like, no, we're asking for often a fraction of the budget. We're asking for a fraction of what they're willing to invest. And they're going to say yes, because we're giving them a deal on something that is way more valuable, even if it's just your IP and your talent. That alone has tremendous value, and we will be convinced otherwise, especially if we go in with that level of, quite frankly, intimidation. That sometimes, and I'm going to say the thing out loud, sometimes they haven't even created it, but we walk in with it sometimes, right? And I'm guilty of that too, right? I've been in environments when I haven't been othered, but I operate as the other because that's what the world and the past has created. And so walking into every room with fresh legs, every room with fresh energy, and knowing who you are. And if you don't yet, fake it and ask for the big number.
Yeah. Right. That's a good number.
Well, while we're clapping, and this is more of a statement than anything, I just want to give you your flowers because it's No, seriously. So, I've known Valeisha now over a decade, so I'm gonna age myself. Yeah, it's been that long. I was doe-eyed at BET as like an assistant, and she had come in, and I've been following your career ever since. And not just asking for the number. And I actually was sharing this with her on the way here. One of the things that I admire most about you is not just asking for the number, but you've created positions in top level organizations that didn't even exist before you got there. So it's one thing to go in and be like, okay, I see that job and I want it. You've walked like the Grammys. You walked in and was like, you guys don't have this and you need it, and this is what I can add, and this is why you should pay me. And you did it. And that's different. That's different. And so I've always just admired your journey and what you've done. And so I just want to give you your flowers.
And we'll take a master class on that.
I was going to say, so for anyone watching who isn't quite familiar, so I worked for the Grammys for nearly 3 years and came in as their first Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. And I was promoted to co-president of the entire organization. And in that role, first woman, first Black woman, and, everything from marketing to awards, membership, HR, diversity. I hired a head of diversity at the time, rolled up to me. And I think the thing we don't talk about enough is, one, the creativity to create a role, right? And to have the confidence and the courage to go pitch or ask for the role. And that you can be kind as a leader, right? And I think that media, perhaps, or even other examples of leadership have taught us that you have to be this like bold, audacious, confident, person to go get things done. And it's just not inherently not my nature, right? Like, I'm actually an introvert. I'm actually very, very, very shy. You can ask Ashley. When I leave spaces like this, I need like an entire day to recover. I think you know this about me too. Like, I'm actually like really stretching even right now. It's just not the way I'm wired. And so because of that, and watching other examples of like bold leaders that I admire, I thought I had to be someone else to be in a role like this. And I now know that authenticity is the answer. That's it, right? Confidence, yes. Authenticity, for sure, though. And when you know your stuff, right? You've done the work. You're prepared, right? No one can outwork me on the planet.
Yeah.
I'm clear on that, right? You may come close, but you won't. Because often when everyone's talking, I'm doing, right? And that's the part that I think a lot of folks don't see. Like my happy space, like many of us, right? Even as creatives, and certainly in corporate, like my happy space is behind my laptop in sweats, like building the strategy, building the deck, right? Building the timeline, looking at the P&L. And so when I pop out and I make it look good, people think that that's all I do. It's like 5%. I just make it look really, really good. But that's not the magic. The magic for me is in the execution, which I believe, tying it back, makes all of us great creatives. Like I never wanted to be the person that talked and didn't deliver. And so I think to bring together creativity and corporate, you have to do both. And honestly, I think if I had to index more on one, it would be on the corporate and on the executive side, right? You have to bring it to life and market it and reach the widest possible audience. If not, it sits on the shelf, right? So thank you for giving me my flowers. Back at you.
I have one more question for you before I open it back up to the group. So I'm glad that you touched on how you can be creative within a corporate space, but some people can feel like the very institutions of corporations stifle their creativity and keep them from being creative, whether that's just dealing with the challenges of terrible team dynamics or the stress of KPIs and a culture like what we're experiencing now, where there's layoffs happening left and right at different companies or just other dynamics that make work difficult. So for folks that really struggle, or even if you think back to your own moments where a corporation could have felt like it was just killing your creativity, how do you tap back into it? How do you revisit that and bring it more into the forefront of how you operate?
I think first we have to acknowledge, and has been a part of my own leadership growth, that it's business, period, right? Like a successful, thriving business has to grow their bottom line. They have to increase their profit margins, and that's the nature of business. And that's absolutely what they should be doing. Right now, of course, not at the expense of people. People over profit, right? Taking care of home first, which for me has always meant internal before external, right? Taking care of home, working from the inside out of any organization or corporation. But the business has to thrive financially and economically. If not, it won't exist. And if it doesn't exist, there's no creativity to be had, right? And so I think, right? So I think any creative in a corporate space, I would strongly encourage that you really get to understand and know the business that you're driving creative for, right? Understand how they generate revenue, not just in your space, but across the landscape, right? Understand the model and be a part of those solutions, right? Creatively, you can drive revenue, right? Creatively, even in DEI, right? DEI is a great revenue generator, and the data supports that, right? Any organization who prioritizes DEI has a 19% minimum return on their investment, right? So it's understanding that although you may not work in finance in that organization, although you may not work on the business side of that organization, you too, if you understand it and get under the hood, can be a great revenue generator even through your creativity. However, if that's just not for you, that's okay too. And I think it's okay to say, maybe I'm not really built for this corporate environment. Maybe I want to go the agency route, or maybe I want to create my own business. But I would say it won't be easier, right? So as you make those informed choices of corporate or not, it's still understanding that business is a huge driver for your creativity. And, I would just say, and it will never be easy, no matter the environment, just do what really resonates within you. I've been on both sides, and I've enjoyed both sides, honestly, right? I've just enjoyed being in a corporate space. I've enjoyed even the obstacles in corporate spaces. Although frustrating, right? It's still like I expect it and anticipate it because it's business. And the same thing as founders, right? You know how it feels when the calls don't come in as quickly as they used to, right? When you're with a big brand, everyone calls you back. Call me back. Okay, girl. Okay. And those calls slow down. People don't call you back as fast as they used to, right? You show up in Cannes and it's a different experience, right? But it's worth it if that's for you. And so I think, if you're searching for an easier path, it doesn't exist. But if you're searching for a path that's in more alignment, then you have to ask yourself those questions and give yourself those honest answers and move accordingly. Or do both. Entrepreneurship is a thing for those who can.
Yeah. Well, I want to kick it back to you all. And with so much to think about right now, I want you to take a second of reflection and just kind of tap back into the last time you had to foster that creativity within yourself. It could be really recent. Maybe it's happening right now for us as entrepreneurs or internally. And I want you to just think about, what are you discovering about yourself as you tap into that creativity? So just take a couple of seconds and then we'll just hear from each of you. What are you learning about yourself?
Sorry.
Victor?
There you go.
I just want to hear you talk, B. Because I'm like so good with notebook. Like I need the recording. I think for me, you started actually when you talked about being multifaceted. And that's the reflection. As we're doing different types of business as entrepreneurs, you're seeing all the different lanes and abilities. Once you start a business, right, you're pivoting all the time. So just as you said, I launched Kinship, and Kinship is a social impact advisory firm.
And then DEI was taken away, and there's this attack on our culture and on our people. And luckily for me, I've got athletes as clients, and that's the business that I'm in. But I told my clients, I said, I don't just want to help you be philanthropists. Like, I too want to be that. I am that, right? So how do I creatively tap into those opportunities for myself to be able to be in these spaces where I now can say, like, I have the faith in myself to do that. And even though people put me in a box as the community girl, and I'm like, oh, no. put me in the box as the money girl. Like, let's be creative. Everybody think outside the box. And so the reflection of this conversation too, and obviously listening, to UV, is we can do and be it all, right? And all of these different spaces. Yes, there's going to be sacrifices. Yes, it's about timing. But for me, as a 3-year-old entrepreneur who's building a whole bunch of new cool shit, y'all, it's just amazing. I'm doing movies. I'm executive producer now. We're doing a movie with President Obama and all these people. And I'm like, I wasn't a movie director 2 years ago. I wasn't a podcast director, executive produced Dawn Staley's podcast and Asia Wilson, all these people. I never did any of that before. But now having that open mindset that I am that because of my expertise, because of the 20 years I put into the industry, is just that reflection is that I can be all things. So, and I am. Period.
I think for me, it's remembering that I am the value proposition. Like I mentioned, I started my career at BET. Since then, I was at Ebony Magazine. I've been at Cash Money. And in each of these different spaces, again, that's when people saw the value, right? Because I was with these brands. And now that I'm not and working on building my own thing, there was a moment where I kind of forgot that I was the value, right? I was like, dang, I'm not getting invited to the same events. People aren't responding to my calls anymore. And it was a tough journey and still is, because I'm still actively building what I'm doing, but just having to remind myself that I was in all of those spaces and thrived in those spaces because I can be that in any room. And anybody would be lucky to have me because I can operate in all these different spaces as a creative, as an executive, as a problem solver, as a producer, as a assistant. Listen, whatever needs to be done, Milan can get it done. And that's why people do still call me. And I have to remember that I am her, I am she, whether I have a title or an organization behind me or not. So, yeah.
He says, just as well. Yes, he did. Yeah. Yes, actually. Okay, so I would say that I would like to retweet what both of you have said already. Thank you. What I'm learning the most is that it takes time, but it can happen, and that I am limitless.
It truly is about, what are you on this planet to do?
Yeah.
What is the impact that you want to make? And what is the legacy that you want to leave behind? Period. And I can guarantee you that the money will follow.
Yeah.
When you are following truly in your purpose. But when we cloud that thinking with all of these different things that in the end don't matter, then I think that's where we lose the creativity. That's where we end up stuck in jobs that aren't really for us and don't really serve us because we've allowed our mind to take over our heart. And so for me, I would say, stay connected to your inner voice and stay connected to your instincts, because every great entrepreneur that I know or that we've researched, right? You gave Jobs as an example. Yeah. Pure instincts, and the gall to go get it.
Yeah. I don't know if I can follow up to everything that you ladies are saying. Wow. I think one of the things is, I know we talked about like fear at the beginning, or like fear to fail or fear of the unknown. And I think, I don't know if it's a matter of experience or just being around folks that are creative. But I think just embracing the ambiguity of what that next step is, whether it's, spiritually driven or whatnot, but embracing that ambiguity and knowing and having the confidence and the self-assurance that no matter what, you're going to be okay because you are the value prop, right? And I think that's kind of where I'm at, and what I'm taking out of it is, lean into that. at the end of the day, no matter what, you know what it's taken you to get to this place. And those are transferable skills and experiences that you can take and continue to build on. So I would say that's my reflection and what I'm taking away.
I would say mine is options. I think one of the things that corporate or, we graduate in levels. You go to elementary school, then junior high and high school, and you just try to keep graduating. And I think the corporate structure kind of puts you in that path too, which is a very narrow view of how to do things and what success could look like. So what I love about creativity and tapping into those creative moments is you begin to see other options. So a door that's closed begins to be something maybe you crawl around or crawl under, and you find other ways to accomplish what you need. And I think anytime I have a moment to tap into that, I see more options. And so I really do thank you. I'm going to echo what Milan said and also give you your flowers. Earlier, there was a story that you were sharing of a woman who was starting her business journey and said how much she felt encouraged. You couldn't meet with her, but you were able to respond and, encourage her. And I think you do that for so many, probably now at the scale of hundreds of thousands of women. And that's a really, really beautiful thing. And so I do want to give you your flowers for that. And thank you for the creativity you foster in all of us. Any final thoughts before we close?
I just want to say thank you to you and to give you your flowers. I think, it's one of those things where you hear a lot of people talk about how sometimes we don't support each other in business. And from the moment we met, you have always been such an open, beautiful, professional businesswoman and light in every room that you enter. And so I want to say thank you for the grace and class and sophistication with such strong delivery that you bring to every business environment that you're in. Like, you truly are an example and a model of what being a founder and working for some of the biggest companies in the world, like what that could mean, right? For someone so young to be able to be at such a high level in business is inspiring me. And so you never know sometimes how your mentee could become your mentor. So I look at Lena like, tell me how you did it, girl. Show me how you did it. And so thank you for being you. And then the last thing that I'll also say as we depart is, look at us.
Look at it.
Right? We're not in stuffy business suits, right? We're not in whatever, we were told we had to be and how we had to look to be taken serious in business, right? And so I'm inspired that we can sit in a room like this and show up authentically as who we are without compromising in any way our strong business acumen, right? We can do it all and be fabulous as we do it. So thank you for creating this space. And thank you to each of you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Valeisha. Thank you to all of you for participating and sharing some of your insights to your journey. It's really amazing to learn from all of you. Any final words for us, Valeisha?
Just that you don't have to choose between corporate and creative. We can do it all. We can be all of the things. If you're in a corporate space right now and you're not feeling inspired, bring creativity to the role. Present those bold ideas. And if you're creative, don't forget the corporate part, right? Deliver those ideas with the flawless execution that they deserve so that they can live in the world and with your consumers that you anticipate. So thank you for having me. And thank you for being here. Thank you.